Hello and welcome everybody to another AHA webinar. The Workplace Balancing Act is our topic today. It's practical strategies and candid insights on navigating the human side of today's toughest people challenges. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Wendy Giuffre, President and Principal Consultant of Wendy Ellen Inc., and one of Western Canada's most respected voices in practical people-first HR strategy. With 30 plus years of HR experience across industries from oil and gas and high tech to nonprofit and hospitality, Wendy has built a reputation of cutting through complexity and bringing the human back to human resources. Wendy founded Wendy Ellen Inc. in 2005 and has since grown it into a thriving consulting firm, serving organizations across Western Canada, the US, and beyond. Her approach is grassroots, deeply practical, and grounded in hands-on experience. She's also the co-author of the only HR best practice you'll ever need, a candid common sense guide that reflects her belief in simplifying people management and building healthy, sustainable workplace cultures. Wendy's expertise spans the full spectrum of HR, employee relations, leadership coaching, organizational strategy, HR infrastructure, group benefits, and career transitions. She's also widely recognized as a trusted advisor, a media contributor, and a sought-after speaker on the evolving realities of today's workplace. Enter where she is here today. Above all, Wendy's known for her ability to earn trust at every level of an organization, helping leaders and teams navigate through tough challenges with clarity, empathy, and real-world wisdom. I'm confident our AHA members will take away a few pearls to carry it forward into their organizations. And yeah, Wendy, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. I don't know that I have to say much after that introduction.
Not too many blanks to fill in. That's all right. Well, with a resume like that, it's clear you are onto something with your approach and your ability to support business owners from that human resources perspective. But in hopes of maybe filling in some of those blanks, let's rewind the clock a bit, and maybe you can share how you got your start in HR, and as a business owner yourself, what problems or gaps that you saw in the market that led you to take that leap into entrepreneurship and start helping business owner from the business owner seat.
Yeah, sure. I joined Shell Canada actually right out of university a number of years ago. And at that point was put in I was a technical writer is what I was doing for that organization. And then the downturn hit way back then, and they got rid of all those sort of extra departments. And I was fortunate enough to be put into HR. So I spent a good 14 years at Shell in HR, various areas, a lot what in the old days they used to call them hard and soft sides of HR. So I was more on the hard side, which was policy, benefits, comp, pension, those kinds of things. So we parted ways, and part of that reason was I wanted to work. My ex-husband had a financial advising business, and I was going to grow the group benefits side of that business. So started doing that, and what I realized is the clients that were looking for group benefits also needed HR support, that size of clients. So I formalized my business in 2005 and coupled the benefits practice and the HR practice. No longer broker benefits, consult for my clients in that area, but no longer am a benefits broker myself. I choose to work with competent colleagues in that area. It's just a bigger business. So I really started my entrepreneurship in 2005. I've never looked back. And I love the world of the small to mid-sized business, and really started with myself and realized that I only had so many hours in the day. I had small children at the time. So kind of grew consultant clients, and now we're at 12.
Oh,
So
wow.
we keep, we have a number of long-term clients that we keep working with, but also our projects churn month to month with, project work. So we do a lot of fractional business with our clients. And yeah, I'm fortunate. I have consultants that have stuck around for years with me. I don't have that turnover, and clients is the same. So not only is it a good business to be in, it's a very enjoyable business to be in. It's fun people to work with, and it's
Fantastic.
just,
So
yeah, it's fun getting to know the clients, the businesses.
after 14 years of policy, getting into the people and dealing with a little more client and people leadership is probably a welcome
Yeah.
change for someone like you.
Yeah, and just getting out of the, getting down to be able to work with business owners or C-suite, those kinds of things. It's very rewarding work.
Ah,
Yeah,
fantastic. Well, part of the reason that we wanted to have someone like you, and we're fortunate to have you, is obviously business owners today are juggling a workplace that's changing crazy fast, hybrid expectations that never seem to settle, AI reshaping roles, teams collaborating across online platforms instead of hallways, and workplaces that could have a 22-year-old and a 62-year-old that are expected to communicate seamlessly and still be productive. So lead, and not only that, but leaders trying to keep culture strong, productivity steady, expectations fair, all with the evolving landscape. It's a lot.
it is a
So
lot.
that's why these conversations matter.
Yeah. I think the two biggest things that have affected the working world in the last 5, 6 years, I have to keep thinking about what year we're in, is COVID changed the landscape of work hugely, probably the biggest in decades, from actual what happens in and around the workplace. And then now AI, that's going to be, and I don't think anybody's in a place now to really determine what that's going to look like, but I think everything from jobs to the tools that are available. I think those are going to be the two biggest things if we look back on what, I mean, it's changed a lot of things, but just from the working world perspective, kind of the two big events for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't like to dwell on those periods, but you can certainly see their fingerprints are still
Yeah.
um, everywhere in business for sure. I was thinking that a real good place to start here, and a logical kind of path for this conversation, might be to start through the lens of business owners and business leaders in the hiring recruitment phase and following that role, through onboarding, growth, perhaps ongoing management, some ups, downs, and perhaps some difficult decisions surrounding the end of employment. Does that sound reasonable?
Sounds perfect. Yeah.
Okay, great.
So, I mean,
So,
I could start a little bit about talking about the hiring for, small
sure.
to mid-sized business. And hiring recruiting is it's an interesting area, because when there's a lot of candidates, it takes a lot of time for employers to go through resumes and interviews, those kinds of things. And on the flip side, when there's not a lot of candidates available, it takes, you really have to search out those good candidates. So they're recruiting, it's from our business perspective, a very funny business, because there's the two sides, and there's always challenges with both. Um, and I think now, there's so many, well, there's, of course, there's LinkedIn, there's Indeed, the big ones that people use. Um, and they're obviously amazing tools. And then some of the bigger organizations have their recruiting software that, really funnels resumes through and pulls out key candidates. So there's lots of different ways to do it. A big challenge that we're finding too with recruiting is that you get a lot of applicants that aren't eligible necessarily to work in Canada and are looking for that opportunity. So it's a great thing if you are willing to sponsor somebody, but it also really can cause a lot of people's time on going through a resume. So it's kind of interesting. I also think the hardest part of any part of HR is recruiting, because it's really hard with all the tools on, people now put their resumes through AI systems, those kinds of things, right? And so they know exactly how to write the resume for the job. So it's really through the interview piece, the reference checking, even that's getting harder. We often ask people to do a video summary with, we give them some key talking points that gives a really good insight into, one, how they can use technology and their personality, their ability to communicate. So there's different ways to sort of really try to pull out some key candidates in recruiting.
Right. And I mean, that obviously comes with, leaders want it all. They want the right person for the right price. And oftentimes it's right now.
Yeah,
So
and
that whole,
I agree. And then some people wait too long too. There's a fine line there, because if you wait too long, the good candidates are going to be gone, right? So, through the recruitment process, sometimes we have clients that drag it out 6, 8 weeks. Well, you almost have to start again, because the candidates that you've that you've gone through and assessed and have pulled as the top candidates are often gone. And that's why they're the top candidates. So there's really that fine line. You got to do your due diligence, but you also can't prolong the
Yeah,
process too long.
yeah, absolutely. And as you say, with the tools now and the amount of just, it's almost it can be, almost paralyzing. There's so much
Mhm,
information at our fingertips, and what's the right information. And
mhm.
as you say, with AI now, make me a resume that makes me a candidate for this role. But
Yeah,
if the culture doesn't fit, how do you
yeah,
flag that early in the process?
yeah.
So I mean maybe on that, during the interview process, what are some areas that kind of make you pause even when a resume does look like that person would be perfect for the role?
Well, a lot of times if they can't answer, like you can put anything on paper, but if you can't answer a question around that experience, people are really good at talking about their experience at a company, if even if they've embellished it. But when you can really, if you ask about a certain skill set, how you use this, or you really dig down into the role, they should be able to quite succinctly and without too much pause answer the question. I also, if a candidate is really, just flies through the questions like that, also makes me think how prepared they were, over prepared. Whereas someone who takes time to think, it also makes me think that that candidate has actually had those experiences. So it's just, you really got to look at sort of how that whole interview goes. And I know a lot of people like interview guides, which are great because you should have the same talking points, but it's also nice to go off script so that you really get to know, and you can look further into certain stories they're telling or experiences they're telling. That's how you really sort of get the good and the bad. And I
Right.
also like to talk about gaps, like why did you leave, or what and everybody's resume doesn't have a happy ending after every job. And often you get the best information when you find out maybe why it wasn't a happy ending. And
Right.
it's not necessarily a bad thing. So it really shows the person's character. Maybe it was an ethical decision. There's a lot of things and a lot of good information you can get from that.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, even just going back to the interview process, there's kind of that difference between, are you knowledgeable about the subject, or are you a really good test taker? Because if
Exactly.
you can ace the interview based on reps, but where the rubber hits the road, perhaps there's not the depth there required.
Hmm.
And perhaps that could come through during the interview, like you say, pausing, thinking, and expanding on experience. But that also leads into reference checks. Now,
Hmm.
I've been the fortunate benefactor of working with and for people who were still willing to give me a positive reference. But the reality is I probably wouldn't have put their name forward if I didn't know they were going to give me a good reference. So how much value can you gain from those reference checks?
That's interesting because I do have this discussion with clients about reference checking, that in a way it's a useless exercise. If you get somebody that doesn't give a good reference, that was a great thing because that person has not validated their references. But what I like to do is I like to, instead of them giving me references, I like to ask if I can speak to someone at this organization, or if I kind of ask who to speak to. And like I said, kind of going back to, even if they say, I'd really prefer you not, and here's why, you get more information that way. So I prefer to be on
Oh,
the flip side and ask for references, like specific. I
right.
mean,
Yeah,
it kind of
that's a
goes
good.
back to that Seinfeld episode, I think, where it was George Costanza that, had their buddy at the end of every line that he gave for a reference. I mean, it can be done. So that's why asking, and it just often brings up more information about the individual.
Right. Yeah, I like that idea of, obviously it's a small city, it's a small world, and LinkedIn and other online tools sure make it even smaller. So
Yep.
having the social license or the approval to talk to somebody there uh, can be very telling. And if they explain why not, as you say, that there's a lot that
Mhm.
you can kind of glean from that as well.
And the one other,
Now,
just one little last tip on that is just pay attention to red flags. If there's any red flag, anything doesn't sit right, you got to listen to that, because 10 chances to one, you'll be 3 or 4 months down the road and realized you should have listened to it. So it's got
Right.
a lot of it, really. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? With small to medium business owners, they've got a number of competing priorities. Sometimes they're on the tools, or they're on the shop floor, or they're working directly with clients, and sometimes they'll make that bad decision based on, a warm body is better than nobody,
Yeah.
and making that can, now you're back in this at the starting position, or perhaps you've upset culture, and they end up being a bigger resource drain down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
So
that kind of takes to cultural fit, right? That's, a lot of skills, not all skills, of course, but a lot of skills you can train or hone. One thing you can't necessarily is a personality and how they fit with your culture. And especially small to mid-sized business, a bad hire, not only will it cause you problems when you have to replace that person, but it can really tarnish, a good culture. And especially the
right.
longer you keep a person like that, if the rest of your employees are thinking, how is that acceptable in the culture that we have? So cultural fit
Yeah.
is really very important. In a larger organization, people can kind of hide or, get away with some of that behavior, but not in a small to mid-size. It can destroy a culture in a very short time frame.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm involved in a lot of kids sports and played a lot of sports growing up, and that there's so many analogies that transfer, but it's that guy that hits 50 home runs or scores 50 goals, but is a cancer in the dressing room, and he gets
Yeah.
away with things, or she gets away with things because she's a high performer, but it really has a drag on the organization overall. Now, you mentioned something earlier, and you said it does come down to gut. um, that's tricky. Obviously, that's very
Mm-hmm.
subjective. And is there a way that you can, or have you seen in your experience, is there scorecards or metrics, or things that can kind of mitigate that hiring based on gut?
So we often, for some really, especially more senior level roles, we put together a competency matrix, a hiring matrix, right? So you have the key competencies of the role, you have your candidates, and your questions should align with those competencies. So the questioning should be able, the goal is to pull out where you think they fit on that competency. So we do use a more objective tool for that. Everybody on the interview panel scores, and then, but sometimes because of gut and because of red flags, you may not hire your top numbered person. But that's what I'm saying is, they may have all the competencies that you're looking for, but there's just something that bothers you. And it could be in something they said, and there's a lot of red flags that can pop up. So and not necessarily to kibosh the person, but at least have that conversation with the interview panel. But there are ways to not just go by gut. Um, but I think, a lot of times, especially if someone is going to be working closely with you, there has to be a chemistry, and they often suggest that the person that is going to be working closely with that individual sit by them as well.
Right. Yeah, and I do like
Take
that
that.
competency matrix of, it's almost your minimum barrier to entry. Nobody
Yep.
You're not going to take anybody that doesn't satisfy those must-haves.
Hmm.
Now it kind of takes the subjective element just to that
Hmm.
those final few percentage points. I like
Yep.
that. Now, in terms of the hiring process, to kind of round that out, what's the kind of the number one mistake that you see from business owners or hiring managers that are, they do have a number of competing priorities, and they do need to button that seat, and they do need to, try to be as productive as possible, as quickly as possible. What's a big mistake that you see, and a big flag that you consistently
Well,
see that you need to coach out of your clients?
I think it's what we just talked about. It's on both sides, either rushing or prolonging. It's really, if you're going to hire, you need to keep the process going, but you still need to make sure that you assess the candidates properly. And sometimes that takes longer. And if it's of a more senior role, you also want to get that person out of the boardroom interview setting, go for a coffee, go for lunch. Maybe you take the team, not that the team has, the sort of the final say, but you kind of get some feedback from the team. So the important thing is to keep the process going. Candidates, good ones, are not going to sit around and wait if they get another offer. It's the bottom line.
Right, absolutely. Okay, now let's talk about what happens after we finally hire someone great. So we've gone through those processes. We've got our all the requirements of the role. We've gone through the reference checks, and not surprisingly, they all got glowing references. But because recruiting and hiring is tricky, and onboarding is kind of where we either reinforce a good decision or unintentionally undo it. What does good modern onboarding look like?
Good modern onboarding nowadays is pretty much automated. Like there's so many, most of our clients we encourage to get on a, web-based human resource information system. There's massive ones for big companies, but for that small to mid-sized business, Collage, Bamboo, Humi, some of the ones that our clients use, and they're great systems. They take care of all the onboarding. They can manage the onboarding, so it's paperless. You have the employees sign everything, you set up all their introductory meetings, everything is done. You've set up tasks for managers to have meetings with the individual, so everything's task-based, run through a system.
Okay,
And
great.
within that system, you have all their pay information captured. You can input training requirements. Let's say there's a work permit, you put that in, and when it's expiring, it manages everything you need to do. And a couple of them actually have payroll attached to them as well, but others coordinate with payroll providers as well as benefit providers. So it's the one entry for the employee and the employer. That's, from the mechanics of it. Now from, basically the best way to onboard someone other than the paperwork piece, of course, is first day, first 2 weeks is key. If it's like first impressions, right, for the employee, if that's not really good, you may have someone looking for another job sooner than later. So, and it's sometimes the little things, making sure their desk is ready or all their equipment, maybe putting some swag on their desk, making sure you've organized a welcome lunch, and those things, and then getting that person to sit with the important people that they'll be working with. And the
Great.
other thing is having work for them or having tasks for them. Nothing worse than, this happens often with summer students as well, but nothing worse than people coming, they're excited, and they're twiddling their thumbs. It is a bit easier said than done, but just good onboarding takes good planning.
Yeah, absolutely, and definitely guilty as charged in past lives and perhaps even current. But it's constant improvement and trying to work through those things for sure, and learning from your mistakes. Now, one thing that you said there that piqued my interest is, sure, there's the logistics and the platform element of it, and that's going to act as the single source of truth. But like any software, it's how you use it and how you deploy it. And you mentioned making sure that they're meeting with the right people. In an organization with cross-functional teams, how do you manage who they're meeting, perhaps a cadence of those meetings, and what moves the needle as an organization? Again, maybe that small, medium business that's bringing in that new hire. What goes into there? Who are you meeting with?
Well, I think first, obviously, the first meeting is your direct supervisor, introductions, those kinds of things. But then it is important to start sitting on, if there's team functions that they'll be working on, even if maybe they don't have work in that right away, getting them on those meetings so they can start absorbing. Yeah, what I think it takes 6 months to a year for someone to really get embedded in a role, in senior roles longer than that at some point. So it's really by osmosis in the first couple of weeks, getting them in front of as many people. Obviously, it'd be great to be able to sit down with the business owner or the C-suite. Sometimes that's not possible. So organizations, as part of that onboarding piece through some of these HR systems, is a video welcome, that kind of thing. So with technology now, there's so many things you can do. So many
Yeah, and
things.
And I think we've got the benefit as well as, it could be a blessing or a curse depending which way you look at it. But there's so many online meetings where people are accustomed to having this type of dialogue and having an additional person audit the meeting. Look, I've just brought somebody in and they're just going to
Mhm,
listen in. It's part of their learning. I mean, it's professionally, I think we've all been both exposed to that and required to do it ourselves. So
mhm.
I think there's
And the
probably
other,
just more of an understanding.
yeah, and the other thing that's really important is just making sure there's someone there, whether it be a coworker, their leader, or even, an office administrator type person that really can sit with them and sort of chat about what the norms are. Because you start a new job and if you don't know anybody, a lot of times people do because, referrals are a big thing, but it's nice to know, do people typically go and get coffee? Do they typically eat in a room, the lunchroom, or do they eat at their desk? Or, what is the protocol for camera on, camera off, like that kind of thing.
Ah,
I have a client, it's all avatars. When I first started with that client, I looked a little bit odd because I was the only one with a real face. Like I had no idea they all used avatars. So it's things like that, right?
yeah, interesting. I never thought of even the camera on, camera off, and
Yeah.
kind of matching that culture. How you could stick out like a sore thumb with what you assume to be standard practice, but standard is obviously relative to the
Changed.
organization. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and it's interesting too, I think we've all gone through corporate onboarding and you've certainly facilitated a lot of it over the years, I'm sure. But there's that balance of, okay, we need to get this done. There's this corporate fire hose of information you have to ingest. And how do you make sure that that's a valuable piece of information and not just a checkbox that, all right, you have to deal with this and then come back to me in 2 weeks when all that reading's done. How do you manage that to make sure that that critical first 2 weeks are starting to integrate that new hire?
Hey, it's communication. I mean, part of the onboarding is to make sure you have a touch base meeting with your supervisor, your leader, whatever the terminology is in that organization, and that's the time to ask that, right? Because the other last thing you want to do is waste someone's time too, right? So, those kinds of programs can be evolving it through feedback, definitely.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we've had
I
some clients that actually have people do a mini presentation after their 2 weeks to their team on, what they've learned or, those kinds of things. I'm not judging whether that's good or bad. I think sometimes that puts people in a spot that they may not be ready to be in, depends on a personality, but it's some of that kind of stuff. I have other clients that have done sort of fun, scavenger hunts. Have you figured out where to find this or that? So there's lots of ways you could
Oh, that's a good
inject
idea.
some humor and fun into it. Most
Yeah.
clients don't because it's a task to most people, right?
And it's
So
planning, right?
yeah, yeah.
And I feel like you could answer a number of these questions with that word you used early, communication. And I suspect that's not going to be the last that we hear about it for
No,
for today's conversation
no.
for sure. Um, so now we've got someone on, they're onboarding, now whether it's hybrid or remote. Do you have a favorite kind of low tech onboarding habit or something that you consistently encourage your clients to do during the
Really that
onboarding phase?
really we do encourage them to use a software just so that everything now it's not on a SharePoint file, it's nothing like that where people it's in a cloud-based system, and also there's a lot of employee self-service things that they can do in there as well, so they're really not expensive. And an internal person could administer them. It really does keep everything at everybody's fingertips. Supervisors have access to what they need. People can request vacation time off approved. Like they're just really, they basically take away the job of an HR administrator in a lot of cases.
Got it. Oh, and just kind of prevents the ability for something to fall through the
Yeah,
cracks, or
yeah,
they haven't done it for a while, so they've got to go
yeah,
back into the SharePoint and talk about, okay, what's our hiring playbook look like? And
yeah. And there's no need for employee files. It's all there and it's all accessible, and there's history and records, and yeah,
simplifies it, gives it an audit trail. That's
yeah.
great. Um, What are some typical red flags that you see during the onboarding phase?
That it's not done, or
Yeah,
that people show up first morning and their manager's on vacation, they have no desk, or the desk is filthy, they don't have their passwords. It's nothing worse than someone showing up and feeling like they're not really welcome. And that's what that says to me, right? Even a clean desk, like just something
right,
simple as that, and someone to greet them. And, but we've seen it where people have shown up and they're like, oh, your boss is on vacation, and, I guess we can sit you here. And like, it's just postpone it a week, get,
right,
because it just puts a sour taste in someone's mouth, and it's not comfortable for, it's like the new kid in school, right? It's not comfortable.
right. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think so often when thinking through the hiring and onboarding process, you're thinking about it as the hiring manager or as the business owner. But when you look in the mirror or you flip those roles, it can be really eye-opening. Like, what does a good first day look like, and what does a good couple of first weeks look like? And I think you can probably start to see some answers right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Okay, so shifting now, we've hired our person, we've onboarded them, they're off to the races now. But in 2026, every company says that they care about culture. What actually moves the needle when it comes to culture? What leadership habits shift culture in SMBs? What are you seeing?
Well, the first thing I could say is you've got to walk the talk. That's the first thing. And, we'll often go get up to come, asked to come in and sort of assess the workplace, and we want the culture to be this. But all the policies are the exact opposite to what they want the culture to be. So everything has to work together. If you have a culture of flexibility, let's say, because that's an easy one to choose, you have to have your senior management also showing that they're open to flexibility, maybe being flexible themselves, having your policies support that rather than, strict in office hours, those kinds of things. So everything has to work together to make a culture fit. And there's some places that they're about the work. That's their culture. Work and pay. They pay well, they have good work. That's what you're there for. There's not really much fun stuff. And, you have vacation, but that's what they're known for. Paying well, bonusing well. But the expectation is very different, where we have some other organizations where they've got some work from home flexibility. They may have unlimited vacation flexibility. Their office hours or their dress code is a bit different. So, and everything fits together. So that sort of decision on what that organization, you want that organization to be like, needs to come from the top, and it needs to work its way down. But the people at the top have to walk that.
Right. And it's funny, as someone I've never really been described as shy. I'm a bit of an extroverted extrovert, that very objective, like, look, we're not looking for a conversational culture. We're about productivity, time. And when I hear that, it makes me a little anxious. But the reality is if you're that type of employee and you actually prefer that workplace culture, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's got a bad culture until there's a mismatch between expectations and performance or reality for that employee. So various cultures can, like, it's inherent that you're going to have a number of different cultures in the workplace,
Yeah.
and just finding that fit. And I guess when you're recruiting and hiring, you're looking for that type of person as well.
Exactly. I mean, this is sort of cliche, but you look at a law firm versus a software developing company. Likely will have quite different cultures. So the policy surrounding and the expectation setting, all that stuff, it needs to all fit so that someone going in understands what that is.
It's interesting. You bring up a couple of um, stereotypes might not be the right
Mhm.
term, but as soon as you started talking about a client that was having all avatars on their screen, I immediately start thinking of what industry these people might be in, and how they fit, and how that brings a level of comfort, and of course performance, if there's not an
Mhm.
expectation that we're going to be on camera from
Mhm.
8 till 5 each day.
Yep. Yep.
Do you
Yep.
have any kind of favorite examples of or some trends that you're seeing when it comes to tying kind of performance outcomes crystal clear in a kind of a flexibility environment, so it doesn't just become a free for all? You mentioned unlimited vacation, or we are flexible. How can you continue to manage to performance and outcomes in something that is inherently flexible?
Well, I would say that's an easy answer. No matter what organization, what the culture is, you still need to have expectations. You can have an expectation that someone can do that work all through the night, but still they get that expectation completed, right? Or they understand what that expectation is. Or you could have that you're in the office from 8 to 5:30 and you have an expectation. So the key to any performance is expectations. And, we talk about it's great to set goals and expectations at the beginning of the year, whether it's calendar, fiscal, however the organization works. And you need to follow those up through the year, typically once a quarter. Talk about, let's say someone has 3 key, whether you call them key performance indicators or goals or expectations, let's say they have 3. And it's important to revisit those because things outside of their control can change and can alter those. So it's, that way you can sort of keep on top. You also can find out if you as an employer, as a leader, have let that person down because they haven't had the training, the guidance, the mentorship that they require. So it really helps, one, with the communication and the trust factor built up between a leader and an employee, but it also keeps everybody on track. And
Right.
and and
And
also throughout a year, priorities can shift. So maybe one expectation is out, another one's in. So whether you're doing that in a flexible and you're doing it in this forum or you're sitting across a desk, it's still the same concept.
right.
Companies that run without expectations, I think performance is just hard overall then, because how do I know what you're expecting? I know what my job is. I know what I'm supposed to do, but are there expectations through the year that will help the company achieve their goals for that year? That's in the perfect world, you've got your goals for the company and it just falls down like that. So as everybody works through their goals, you've got at the end, the company succeeds. That's
Right.
a perfect world.
And as you say, those two data points of communication and trust, if you're having a hard time believing that somebody on your team is actually doing the work, that comes down to obviously trust. And if you don't trust them, perhaps that's indicative of your hiring practices and your onboarding practices
Mhm.
as well. Um, and that comes down, or that kind of segues into, again, with this hybrid culture, 2026, obviously, people found out really quickly in 2020 that they could do their work remotely. That from organizations that were steadfast against working from home, that changed. And you're seeing, I don't have any data right now in front of me to suggest that there's more people coming downtown, but it does feel like there's more of a pull to downtown again. Is there any data that you have to suggest that, or what data might you look for to suggest that perhaps hybrid isn't working for an organization?
Well, we hear that, people are being called to the office, which is true. I mean, our clients, same thing. Most of them are still leaving open a somewhat hybrid option, most of them. And, COVID did, there's a couple good things that came out of COVID. I think people understanding that they have a life and a lifestyle that they appreciate. And as opposed to, work-life balance, a lot of times it's being talked about in work-life integration because people realize that they can integrate their work into their lifestyle. Some people better than others. Some people, they just don't have the self-discipline to do that. And that's fine. That's great that there's the office ability. But we're just seeing that even in recruiting, one of the first questions we either get asked or we clarify is whether there is a hybrid opportunity, because people are looking for that. They realize what they can save on gas, what they can save on food, what they can save on dry cleaning, and just the fact that they can, we talk about, if you've got to be at one of your kids' sports practices or games at 5, you can work basically till 4:45 if you had to, whereas if you're at an office, you have to leave. So there's really some positive things that come out of hybrid work for people, and work from home as well. I mean, we talk about, we most of our clients now don't have sick days per se, they have flex days. So because of the fact that people are, need to stay home if their kids are sick, or they've got aging parents or whatever, maybe they have to have a special doctor's appointment, whatever that is. But um flexibility around somebody that can work from home. Maybe you're too sick to come into work because you don't want to spread your lovely germs to the office, but you can still work. So there's a lot of positives to having that flexibility. Um, you got to put some restrictions. There's got to be some guidelines around it. What's the expectation of you being, if you use Slack or you use Teams, that you're available during office hours? If you call and someone doesn't answer the phone, those are sort of the questions that start to, you kind of think. I mean, there's so much software now that can tell if people are online, and then they've got the jiggling mouses that, there's so much of this back and forth. Bottom line, is the person getting their work done? And that goes back to expectations. And do you trust that individual? I think we
Right.
found that problem employees show up faster in that hybrid environment potentially than when in person, because you really do it, you rely on the outcomes of the job when you don't see them there day to day. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of
absolutely.
good things, but there needs to be, we've developed over the time some pretty clear policy around what does that look like.
Right.
So
Yeah. And that's that, like, again, it comes down to communication and trust, and you got to have your antenna up to hear those signals or see those signals. If don't just drive by it if you've tried to get in contact with someone when they're
yeah,
meant to be available. Conversely, I've you could be working on your phone and your teams acknowledges that you're away, or you could be having a face-to-face meeting and your team says that you're away, and there are some kind of false signals there. But
sure.
if you've got a trusting culture and a level of transparency and expectations are being met, those thoughts don't creep into your mind quite as
Yeah,
easily because of that high performance culture.
yeah.
Now, it does seem, and again, starting with your, as you pointed out, it starts at the top. So performance management would, of course, be inherently no different. How we set expectations, give feedback, and keep people growing. Um, if a manager could do, in your experience, what are the few things a manager could do each quarter to kind of keep things on track? And what are some of the things that you consistently recommend when you first onboard with a client in terms of performance management?
Well, I think just kind of what we talked about. We have a tool that we, work with a lot of our clients on, and it's kind of a yearly tool. So the first part of the year, or the first part of either, like I said, the fiscal or calendar, it's let's actually look at the job again and make sure what you were hired to do is still relevant to what you're doing. Because you can have a job description today, and 18 months down the road, your job's evolved. So let's get that settled. And then let's look at what are the company goals, and then how do you fit in with that? So that would be step one. And then quarterly, you sit down and you look, and I like to talk, what are you proud of, or what are some of the letdowns that's happened either in industry or from us? So, and then we relook at where are you at with these goals and expectations? And do you need any support? Is there anything you need? Let's say you're behind and something. Is there anything you need? Is it some training? Is it maybe, a quarter of a person? Like it's sort of, it just keeps that conversation going. It also keeps you in touch with the individual. You find out a lot about, we talk about mental health in the workplace. Oftentimes those conversations, you get a good feel as to, where is that employee at? And they're, in there. I mean, oftentimes employees just carry on and they're the same. But if there's a change in someone, if their work has changed, their dependency and their reliability has changed, oftentimes a good time to have a conversation and sort of, you have to be attuned to what's going on with that individual.
Right. Almost, what are some of the signs that you're seeing before it becomes a formal issue?
Exactly.
Um, and recognizing that. Now, um, it sounds like, again, we're going to go back to communication, but do you have kind of consistent wording or how you might breach these conversations when providing real-time feedback to catch things before perhaps they do become that formal issue?
Well, really, it's just, if let's just say their performance has slipped, let's say their errors, if it's an accounting firm, probably something that there's a few people listening that, and so let's say there's just errors in the numbers and it's something relatively new, or maybe it's a new hire. And it's like, you need to keep to the facts. I've noticed that, the last number of weeks, report A, B, and C, there's been some errors in that report. And it's whether this hasn't been happened before, or, can you tell me a little bit about, what's going on? Why is this happening? You need to stick to the facts. And the other thing too is you need to get that conversation out. So, um, it doesn't have to be a negative conversation. It's you're stating a fact and you're saying, can you explain, like, what's going on? Do you need some help, or did you not understand? It's really to get that person to start talking. And you might have a
Yeah.
total misfit in skills. And if that's the case, then you really have to think about next steps. But, someone could say, yeah, I've got way too many clients to look after. My client load is doubled. Like, it's just to have that conversation. But you got to
Right.
nip that performance in the butt right away. You really do.
Right. Yeah, in that's all comes down. Well, I shouldn't say it all comes down to, but it's that right person, right seat mentality. And if you've got a mismatch there, it's better to catch it early. And
Mhm.
especially, where we're maybe not running into each other in the hallways and we're not having that dialogue. Oftentimes, it would be the objective, the output of their work. If to your point, if something they've typically been doing well or appropriately starts to slip, maybe that's the signal to
Yeah.
catch that.
And sometimes
Uh,
that is the signal that there's something going on with that individual, from a personal standpoint that's affecting their work. That can open up a whole other conversation, right?
right. And culturally as well, how do you separate, the behaviors from the results when you're coaching or leading a team? You've got a new hire and you've said at the start it might take 6 to 12 months to really get ingrained in your role. How do you really, um, obviously in these small medium businesses, we've got finite budgets and we've got forecasts and covenants with the bank, and we certainly want to drive to a performance culture. But how do you separate the results from the behaviors?
Well, the results are often easier to fix. So if someone is missing a concept or missing a competency, there's oftentimes coaching or training about the technical side of the job. The behavior side of the job is different. And that's the one where oftentimes that behavior is going to continue. You could, and those are often the ones too that companies just let go and keep happening and happening. They're very comfortable with saying, this here, let me help you, let me take a course in this, or let's work with, your coworker on this so that you understand the software better. That's easy conversations. The conversations about behavior are not so easy. And so that's why that's nobody wants I forget what the number is, but most people will avoid what they see as a conflict situation for months. By that time, the behavior is the problem. And oftentimes that problem probably should have been addressed 5 months ago. And those ones are harder to fix. And sometimes they're not fixable. So before it destroys the behaviors and the culture in your organization, those are the ones you have to get on top of.
Right, right. Very well said. Now, let's say there weren't those behaviors, and the behaviors that we're seeing are all exactly what we signed up for. Why didn't I hire this person 2 years ago? This person's off to the races. Everyone's doing a great job. People couldn't be happier that they're part of the team. Now we've got an opportunity. What we have this high performer, and maybe they can take on more within the organization. So. With that, you've got kind of this promotion opportunity where they can certainly inspire somebody, but they can also blow up trust within the organization depending on how they're handled. So for leaders and managers, what are some kind of readiness signals that you might see that they're going, they're capable of working outside their current role?
A lot of times it's the individual. They'll say that. They'll ask. They'll say, I really think that I've got this role, and what else is out there. The other thing with top performers is you should let them know they're top performers. You should let them know they're key people. That's how you're going to keep them. And because if they're good performers and they're top people, and you don't really let them know that and support them in that way, they're going to be looking elsewhere. Those are the people that are the risky ones, right? So if you let them know that, and really what you need to do with those high performers or, key performers is give them a career path, show them what that career path looks like. Map it out if you can. I mean, smaller organizations is sometimes more difficult because they're typically flatter. There's not a lot of room for people to grow up, but sometimes they can grow in breadth as well, right? So with different opportunities so that they can learn. But giving them a career path, and let's say it is moving up into a managerial role, and they're nearly ready, but they need, maybe they need to be coached or mentored by another manager, or maybe they need some time leading projects, but let them know that they have a career path here, and this is what it looks like. A
I
lot of
like
people
that.
say we
That's
don't
it's
want to
so
talk to our people that they're, because then they'll ask for more money, and well, sure, but they'll also know that you've got their eye on them and you're investing time and money in them.
right. I like that. It's so simple, and and you can just see it even, whether it's with your kids or your or
Mhm,
kids you coach or your colleagues, for sure. I like that. Now you breached something there in terms of compensation. So promotions obviously inherently
mhm.
come with money questions. So to how do you make that comp talk as useful and I don't know if awkward's the not awkward is the right kind of term, but when you talk about kind of total compensation concepts, whether that's base, bonus, benefits, flexibility, the whole picture. Um, what's a clean way to handle that conversation?
Well, in a perfect world, all like the roles would all be marketed every couple of years. You'd know what the ranges are out in the market, competitive, where you want to sit, in a percentile of payer. So assuming that you have an idea what that role, what the range of that role is, what the bonus structure is, that kind of thing, I'm a firm believer in showing the person that. So you're not pulling the number out of your hat, it's data-based. You've got the numbers in front of them. And, the point of a salary range, it's not number of years in role necessarily, although they do coincide. It's competencies in role. So someone getting promoted, the expectation is they're not 100% competent in that role. So they're going to start at the lower end of the range. As they build
Right,
their competencies, they should move through the range. Bonus structure, on the other hand, bonus, in my opinion, should be tied to performance, not competencies. Like you need to have the competencies to do your job. But let's say there was you acquired a new company this year, so you had all these tasks that needed to be done, and within the exact time frame of the purchase, those kinds of things, and it went off without a hitch. That's when a bonus would come into play, right? Or if you have a
right,
profit sharing type bonus, it's obviously based on the results of the company. So different from salary.
right.
Salary is
Uh,
typically based on competencies.
I like what you said there in terms of, you've got that experience. I heard it said once before where you might say you've got 30 years of experience, but you actually have 1 year experience. You've just done it for 30 years. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you've improved that
That's
skill
right.
set and look to take on more. I like that. So you definitely recommend that kind of salary transparency in terms of ranges or bands. Do you have a
Mhm.
go-to resource that you check that with the market?
Well, we subscribe to a international HR validated subscription, pay factors.
Okay.
It's great for common roles. Where you really have to do your searching is when it's very niche roles. They're harder. There's also salary data you can purchase. We have access to some just because we've participated in various surveys and that sort of thing. But there is data or surveys that you can purchase. They're not, most of them aren't cheap. So depending on how far you want to go, or you hire the big consulting companies that go out and they have databases and databases, right? So, but you
Right.
can find a lot of information online through searching. You can just got to be careful if it's fed by HR validated data, or if it's incumbent fed, because oftentimes that data is not as reliable. But even some of the like LinkedIn, the job boards, those kinds of things are forcing you to put salary ranges in there. So
Right.
there's data. You just search it out. But I really think that every role has a price. It's not the person, it's the role, and then the person fits somewhere in there, really, right?
Yep, that's so true. Yeah. Now, you know what? We're running out of time.
Yeah.
Um, we've taken the happy path through this. We've gone from recruiting to hiring to onboarding to making sure that we match the culture. And now this person's doing so well in the role, they're looking at taking on more in the role. I'm not sure we're going to get the opportunity to talk about, when to introduce performance improvement plans, and then when maybe it's time to make the decision to end that relationship, which oftentimes is of course difficult, but often comes with a relief from both the owner, business leader, and the team member. But I think from a great place to start, if people want to dig further into that, I suspect that you would recommend the only HR best practice you'll ever need.
Yes.
Where
Yeah, that has a lot of good tips on, the employee cycle, kind of what we talked about for sure. The only thing I can say, you can determine quite that's what a probation period's for. 3 months is a little short, but you can figure out in the first few months if a person is going to be a fit there. Some
right,
people just don't like to pull that
or
because
or
it's not pleasant.
or ignore the
Yeah,
signal in hopes that
yeah,
going with the thoughts and prayers techniques for a strategy.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there is an old HR adage, which is slow to hire, quick to fire. And it's really, that's kind of what we've talked about. And it's not letting people develop into a role, but it's if a person is just not a fit, don't, don't be afraid to admit that, I guess, is really, yeah.
Right. Well, Wendy, you shed so much light on the hiring practices that our small business community has. You've got just an absolute wealth of experience, and it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for spending the lunch hour with us and our AHA members. I suspect there's going to be a lot of follow-on questions. What's the best place that our people can get in touch with you if they want to follow up and see if you're a fit for their organizations?
So there is a inquiry link on our website, which is wendyelleninc.ca, or email me directly, which is wendy@wendyelleninc.ca. Either way,
Fantastic.
or they can
That's
contact
that.
you and you can connect us.
There you go. Well, I'm going to be following up with all these folks. They get CPD hours, so it's a great way to further their education. And without the likes of yourself and your expertise, we wouldn't have that possible. So I do thank you very much for once again coming right out of vacation into spending the lunch hour with us. And yeah, once again, thanks so much on
Yeah,
behalf of Amplify and our AHA membership.
my pleasure. Thanks for,
Okay. Thanks so much, Wendy. Take care.
okay,
Have a great rest of your day,
bye-bye.
everybody.
Yeah, bye-bye, everybody.